Hi guys, welcome back to the Confused Millennial podcast. I'm Rachel, your host and the blogger behind theconfusedmillennial.com. And this is a podcast all about helping you embrace more of who you are while navigating this whole adulting thing. We cover everything from personal development and growth to spirituality, careers, and entrepreneurship. That comes out every other week for the last few months, because if you guys have been a listener for a while, you know that I'm pre-recording these episodes right now. So by the time you're hearing this, January 2019, this is the baby's due month. So towards the end of the second trimester, I decided to move the podcast down to every other week because I didn't want to shut down the show entirely, but I also wanted to give myself a quote unquote maternity leave. So the way I went about doing that for the podcast is I went ahead and batch recorded a ton of content during 2018 for you guys. And by dropping the posting schedule from every single week to every other week, it will carry us through until I feel ready to start recording fresh content again. I apologize if you guys hear my dog in the background. He's having a bit of a day today. So happy 2019. I hope January has been treating you well so far. Stay tuned to my Instagram at The Confused Millennial. That's where I'll be updating probably the most as far as any baby updates, just what's going on in my life, because a lot of the podcast and blog stuff is going to be pre-scheduled and things like that, because I want to be as present as possible during that time in my life. But I also don't want to leave you guys hanging, because to be completely honest, I don't want you guys to forget about me. So if you guys are in the digital entrepreneurship space, you know things move quick. And so I didn't feel totally comfortable with shutting things down. So every other week has been the way we've been doing it and the way we're going to keep doing it for another couple months. And I'm really excited about that. And I'm really excited about some of these guests that we've been having. Our last guest that we had in 2018 was Sahara Rose, who was amazing. She talked all about Ayurveda. We talked a lot about aligning with your soul's purpose, and all sorts of fun stuff. If you guys are familiar with her work, she's the published author of 2 books. And if you haven't got that episode yet because you were crazy with the holidays, definitely suggest going back and listening to that after you listen to this one with Cheryl Muir, who is a twin flame guide, life coach, and just all around amazing guest and person. I'm so happy that we got connected through Natalie Miles, who was also on this podcast in the past. If you missed her episodes, highly recommend going back and listening to those. So what Cheryl does, and she's going to talk a lot more about this, is she explains to us what a twin flame connection actually is, how it's different from a soulmate, understanding these different types of karmic relationships that we have in our life, and really making sure that we're actually clearing these wounds and these traumas from quote unquote past lives, if you want to call them that. We talk a lot about past lives and different ways to understand them too. And it's really, honestly, I sat down with her and I'm pretty sure we've known each other before, because it felt like we had definitely crossed paths before, as you guys will hear as we're talking in this conversation. So without further ado, I want to go ahead and bring Cheryl on. I know you guys are going to love this, especially if any of you guys are still recovering from any holiday drama with people. I hope it's a really eye-opening episode for you, and just figuring out, what's the meaning behind all of this and how can you work through those experiences that you may be coming off of. So hopefully you never have to go through them again. So with that, one more thing I just have to say about Cheryl in this episode. I have a lot of spirituality people come on here. We talk about a lot of them throughout the episode. Make sure you go back and listen to those episodes. But what I really love about this one is the practicality of it all. Like, we can get so heady in the spirituality space and the wellness space that we forget practical application. And man, Cheryl's got that on lock. I love how we're taking, these types of past life things and these more woo-woo concepts and driving it into the day-to-day and how that actually looks like healing. And so highly, probably one of my favorite episodes that I've done in a while. Just so excited for you guys to listen. So I'm going to stop talking now. And I'm going to let bring Cheryl on and let you guys listen and learn and grow and all that good stuff. Well, welcome to the show, Cheryl.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm excited to be here and talk all things twin flames.
Me too. We have a couple of mutual friends that were previous guests on the podcast, Natalie Miles and Danielle Page. And so I know you're going to be dropping all sorts of goodies for us today.
Okay, I hope so. I hope so.
So you are a twin flame expert. Why don't we start off just kind of talking about like what is a twin flame even? I know it's been gaining a lot more popularity over the last year or two.
It has, and it's good that it's a little bit more mainstream now, but as with anything, as it becomes more mainstream, there becomes more sort of BS around it and people taking it out of context. So why don't I start by explaining what a twin flame is and kind of why they appear in our lives? Would that be a good place to start?
Yes, I love that.
Yeah, so a twin flame is, and here's all the esoteric woo-woo side of it, and then I'll ground it back in. So a twin flame is one soul in two bodies. So souls can actually split. This was a bit of a shock to me when I discovered this. I'd never heard of this all throughout my spiritual journey. I've been studying this stuff for 8 years. And souls can actually split. So in the place where souls are made, some contain a lot of energy and matter, and they have to split into two, and they split into the divine masculine and divine feminine energy centers. Now, these different half souls, if you will, still complete people in their own right, but these half souls then incarnate into human bodies over many, many lifetimes, and they encounter one another to help each other heal, grow, and ascend. Now, that's the fairy tale. That's the Disney version. But the real life, real world, earth reality is that we meet these people and they cause chaos in our lives. Any area where we've been staying small or we've been in a relationship or a career that's really not right for us, they'll come along and cause all manner of chaos, so that we really look at all of that. Now, not everyone is a twin flame and not everyone has a twin flame, which sometimes makes people get really mad at me. They're like, how come I want a twin flame? And I'm like, trust me, you don't. It's not the Disney kind of thing that you think it is. They are a catalyst, but we don't have to have a twin flame to have this kind of catalyst. I know you had Danielle on the podcast and she was talking about Saturn return. So we can have all these different moments in life, and we may have signed up for, our soul may have signed up for, to encounter this other half of our soul, this other being in another body, and we meet them to help them with our growth. So that's basically what they do, but it is chaotic, and it's something that a lot of people don't understand. They think it's going to be someone who is wonderful and all roses and, you know, cupcakes and all of that, and that's really not the case. It's hard, dark night of the soul kind of work.
Yeah, because there's a lot of confusion out there, I think, that exists where people were like, oh, I don't want a soulmate. I want my twin flame.
Like it's better.
Yeah. And I'm like, that sounds really brutal. So, I mean, also from your perspective, like, where does the soulmate fit into the twin flame thing? And I think also, correct me if I'm wrong here, but like, there's this notion out there that a twin flame is a romantic partner, but in reality, it could be like your child, a teacher, a coworker. Like, it doesn't necessarily have to be somebody that you're in a romantic relationship with.
Yeah, totally. So there's a couple different levels to that. So I think I'll start with the difference between twin flames and soulmates, because that's one of the most common things that people get confused. I think most people have heard of the term soulmate, like I want to meet my soulmate, I want to marry my soulmate, like that's all good. It's all gravy, right? But we have lots of soulmates. We have lots of people that we're really compatible with. Soulmates can be they can be really close friends. They can be that soul sister who you meet at a retreat or a spiritual event and you just get each other right away and support each other unconditionally. They can be sometimes family members, but often family members are more karmic actually than they are soulmate. Now, yeah, we all know that to be true. Soulmates can be pets. They can be like dogs or cats or horses. Like you can have soulmate animals, and that might be a little bit off there for some people. But for those of us who've had a soulmate dog or a soulmate pet, Like, we get that. So what that means is they're made of the same soul stuff as we are. So they feel familiar and they feel like home. A twin flame, we only have one of these people, and one is plenty. If you have one is more than enough. Trust me. And with regards to, is it a romantic partner or not, more often than not, twin flames are romantic in nature. Because if this person was just like a teacher or a friend, you could be like, oh, whatever. But because they are a potential romantic partner, or there's some kind of romantic entanglement element, that's where we get crazy, right? Because we think we're really balanced and spiritual. Then we start dating someone and we realize, oh, I'm a crazy person. So because we have all of our wounds housed within this world of intimacy and our ideas of love, that's usually why a twin flame shows up in that context, to really trigger us a little bit more than a friend would.
From your perspective then, like, well, first of all, why did you decide to get into like learning so much about twin flames?
I had the experience of meeting this person and all hell broke loose. And I thought, what is this? Like, I didn't know what it was. I knew something was different. I did think I was going crazy at points, but I knew something was awry. And I asked my spiritual friends, and they didn't know. And they came out with the usual, move on, get over him, cut the cord. After about 4 cord cutting meditations, I knew something else was required. And ultimately, over the course of about 18 months, I studied this. I did a lot of work with Danielle, who I know we mentioned before, you had on your podcast. And it turns out my work here in this lifetime is about relationships. It's about shadow work. It's about sexuality and intimacy. So this is my work. And I had to meet this person to really step into this work fully. But what I found was, my spiritual friends had no idea what this was. And it really highlighted to me that there's not that much information out there about this, which is useful. If you Google twin flames, you'll find people either say, one, they're a catalyst and these people are never in relationships with each other. That's not true. Some do end up in relationships. And the other extreme is that all twin flames are meant to end up in a relationship, which is very dangerous, because you look at this and you think, well, this person is causing chaos in my life. How can that be someone I want to be with? And we have to be careful too, because let's be honest, some people are using the term twin flame when it's someone that's actually just not good for them. Mm-hmm. And there's nothing spiritual or of the highest good about that. So the way I teach about this is I try and keep it really grounded, because when I first started learning about it, it just felt so intangible. It felt so up in the air, and I couldn't quite get a handle on the esoteric theory and ground it into reality. I thought, okay, but what does this actually mean for people? So what I help people to do now is really learn the soul lessons behind it and help them to heal. It may mean they end up in a relationship with the person, it may not, but it means they heal the relationship that they have with themselves, which is really what it's all about.
Wow. So I have like 5 million thoughts running through my head right now. So I guess like number one, so for me, because there's the very common, more mainstream belief that we are one soul that reincarnates, and we've had quote unquote past lives over and over. And then if you guys are familiar with Shaman Durek, who was on episodes 14 and 15, he has a completely different perspective on this, which is that all of our quote unquote past lives, if we want to use that term, are happening on quantum planes simultaneously, and that there's only one you, and we are comprised of different soul fragments of others. So for instance, in a quote unquote past life, I was Medusa, but that doesn't mean that Cheryl couldn't be Medusa too.
Right.
So where does all of this come together? Yeah. Because I have started to more so gravitate towards this belief of like, okay, I'm comprised of these other souls inside of me. Yeah. So then would it be possible to have multiple twin flames? Because maybe like somebody else that had the soul of Medusa in them, and we meet, and then there's fireworks there.
Right. Yeah, there's a lot of different directions I could go in with that, and that's brilliant and beautiful, and everything Shaman Durek said is accurate and true. I tend not to teach in that way though, and the reason is because I like to try and ground it in, because my head will explode otherwise.
I'm really good at the head exploding thing.
Yeah, and that's great. It's beautiful to have all of that knowledge of spiritually what it means. But here's the thing. Here's the most grounded way I can explain it, is that we've all had past lives. Our soul has many memories and many different experiences, whether we want to say that's happened in the past or it's happening simultaneously. It matters, but it doesn't matter.
Yeah.
Because at the end of the day, it's up to us to heal ourselves and heal all of those memories of what happened. So we're not just healing stuff from this lifetime, we're healing stuff from all of the past lifetimes. And if we're doing this kind of work in this lifetime, the work you do, Rachel, the work I do, the work I'm sure all of your listeners do, or at least are interested in, if you are woke or you are interested in this line of work, then it means that you're a very old soul. And if you're an old soul, you've had lots of lifetimes. If you think about all the people you've dated in this lifetime, not you, but just people in general, think about multiple lifetimes. How many people have you encountered in past lives? And we've got a lot of past life lovers that are now coming up, and we're like, oh, I know you. And this is why we haven't been in touch for the past 2,000 years, right? Because it didn't go so well the first time. So it's that whole thing of really clearing karma is what it's about. And we need to be careful. Just because we know someone from a past life or there's something really special there on a soul level doesn't mean we're meant to date them. Or if we do date them for a short time, it doesn't mean we're meant to end up with them. They're meant to teach us something. And we really need to exercise this non-attachment to the person, the label, and the outcome. So they might be a twin flame. They could be a help. We haven't even talked about karmic partners, but that's the thing as well.
We're going to go there, trust me.
But what it is, it's about clearing karma, and it's for the evolution of your soul.
Yeah.
That's the easiest way I can explain it.
I love that, because I always tell people, like, I had written a blog post sometime this year. I don't even remember. It was like, heartbroken. Here's like how to never experience it again. And the reality, and I started off the post saying, like, I have never been heartbroken. And it's truly because I believe that every relationship, whether it's romantic or platonic, is in our life to teach us a karmic lesson, for us to heal a part of ourselves, for us to regain something that we lost. And when we can kind of make that shift, we're not shifting blame onto others. We're just looking at it as a gift to come back to ourselves, which I love. So I love the work that you're doing, because I think it ties so perfectly into that concept.
Thank you. And I'm sorry, was it yourself that was the author of that post, or was this something that... Right, because what I was getting from that as you were talking, and I'm a little bit psychic as well, and I can't help but kind of see things, hear things, know things, feel things. So we'll see where we go with this. But what was coming through was that you did this kind of work in your last lifetime, in your most recent one, and that's why you've got all this knowledge, because you know you've done this work, and so the work you're here to do now is probably not on relationships. You're like, I've got this, I know this.
Yeah.
And see how easily you knew. Oh well, I'm not going to experience heartbreak this time, because I know that they're here to teach me a lesson. Because you've done a lot of work on this, your soul has, but just not in this, maybe not in this incarnation.
Yeah, it's funny, because if you guys have listened, I think it's episode 6, Patience and Stalking, a millennial love story, where my husband and I share the story of how we met in this life. You guys know that we were together in a previous life where I actually cheated on him and left him. And so when I saw him in this life, I was obsessed with, I was like, I saw his picture online. I was like, that is who I'm going to go date. I literally inserted myself into his life over the course of 4 months. And then a month into us hanging out, I was basically living with him. But I just always knew it was going to be an easy relationship, that we were going to help each other grow, that we were going to complement each other. But it was, I had already kind of felt like, okay, I've had these relationship experiences. This is it.
Yeah, your soul knew.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it was so
beautiful.
Cool. So let's talk about karmic partners. And
oh, hell. All right. Yeah, okay. Karmic partners, we all have them, and we all have numerous amounts of these people. So really, we've shared past lives with them, and or they're here to teach us something really significant. A karmic partner really is someone who you date who isn't really that good to you, but really the onus is on us to look at that and say, I deserve more than that. And if I keep dating the same person over and over again, not the actual same human, but the same pattern of person, the same prototype, different human, but same pattern, same thing. If we keep doing that, it's up to us to look at it and say, what is this trying to teach me?
Mm-hmm. That is my greatest struggle. I have the same friend since I was 7 years old that just keeps taking different shapes in different human bodies, but it's literally the same person over and over for over 20 years now. I'm like, what is the freaking lesson at this point? So how are we supposed to deal with that person?
And that's a friend that you have that's going through that?
No, that's me. I just keep literally having the
it.
same, it's just the same type of friend. It's the only friend that really gets under my skin. And just keeps coming in my life. Like there's been 3 human forms of this person, but they always come in my life for these periods. And I'm like, you are the same person as this person that was in my life. Yeah. What is the lesson here?
So, okay, so let's dig deeper with that. So what's the pattern? What's this person like? Are they someone that's really needy and draining? Are they narcissistic? What's the scoop?
Yeah, so it tends to be that they are a person where I have, similar to my husband, looked at them and been like, I want to be their friend. They usually kind of have that quote unquote like popular glow about them. Mm-hmm. And they are usually like that person that has like 5 different best friends, which is like really difficult for me because this is where my Cancer side comes out, where I'm like, well, I get that you can have other best friends, but like you kind of are talking out of both sides of your mouth. And I kind of feel like you're not really my friend and you don't really respect me because you're probably talking about me like you're talking about this person to me. So I get like super insecure about it. And then ultimately what ends up happening is I become a really big pillar for them to lean on with, whether it's business stuff, emotional stuff, something like that. And then they kind of just turn around and do something that really ends up hurting me.
Yeah. So there could be 2 different things going on there. It could be that, you touched on starting to feel a little bit insecure that, you're really close friends with this person and yet they have 5 other best friends. And it's almost like being cheated on, but by a friend.
Yes.
It has that kind of feeling on. And I totally get that because I'm very, very emotional too. And I don't do friends by halves. If we're friends, we're friends. We're like ride or die, like, yeah. So there's that side of it. And maybe there's a lesson in there about learning a little bit of detachment. That's option 1. And on the flip side of it, it could be that there's something you're trying to learn there about not letting these types of people in your life that actually are kind of taking advantage of your heart. Mm-hmm. Right. So it could be either or, a little bit of both. They're the 2 things that came up. And another thing that rung a bit of a bell was codependency in friendships. Mm-hmm. We might have fixed codependency in our love life, but it is rife and it comes from way back. It comes from a parent that gave too much. We may have had a dynamic of having a very, I don't like to say narcissistic too much because I think the label narcissist is really.
My mom was narcissistic. You can say it in this case.
Okay, got it. See I knew there was something like that going on. So there could have been a narcissist codependent dynamic in the family. There could have been an addict and a codependent. Mm-hmm. And when that happens, it usually shows us this model of really the first relationship we see between 2 humans, our mom and our dad, or our dad and our mom, or our caregivers, whoever raised us. And we see that it's about sacrifice. These close relationships are about sacrifice. And so we start modeling that in not necessarily romantic relationships, although we often do, but we model it in relationships too, in friendships, as well. So it could be a pattern that's playing out from childhood too.
My head is just like, I wish I could explain it. It literally feels like it just exploded right now. Because when I was saying it earlier that I've had 3 of these, I was like, what am I saying? Why am I saying 3? I only think of these 2 in particular, but I feel very committed to saying 3 right now. And as you were talking, I remembered that the 3rd one is actually the one from when I was 3-4 years old, my very first ever best friend. And where I started getting this message ingrained where 3 girls, my mother would always say, 3 girls can't be best friends. And that's, so you just hit a big nail. Thank you.
All right. Conversation over. We're done. No, I'm kidding.
That's amazing. I mean, wow. Cause I couldn't figure out why I said 3 and it makes so much sense. It goes all the way back to that very first one. Yeah. Amazing.
And you already knew that, right? You already knew like that's not something I've like implanted in you or whatever. Like you knew that, and I just helped to guide you back to the moment that came from. I mean, we never want to blame our caregivers and our parents because they're doing the best they can, but they model something. They model a relationship. They model a relationship between a man and a woman and romantic partners and our first relationship we have with someone of the same sex, like, ourselves and our mom. We could talk about also sons and their fathers, that same gender relationship of friendship. And we have that model from our parents. And it causes all manner of patterns we're not even aware of. So sometimes it just takes that awareness to switch on a light so that we know why we're doing what we're doing.
Yeah. I mean, it makes so much sense. Like, it's just one of those things I was like, why does this keep coming up? And it just like, it all just clicked for me. So thank you.
Yeah. And we see that and we go, oh, relationships have to be self-sacrificial. I have to sacrifice part of myself for a friendship or a relationship. And that's part of the work I do with people too. And it's, again, not just from what happened when we were kids, but what happened in previous lifetimes too. I'm qualifying in past life regression at the moment because I want to start doing that for people because it's so rich in stuff that we can bring up. And of course, I have a lot of Scorpio in my chart, so we're going to get into all the shadow with that. So it's really important. And I think when it comes to past life stuff too, it's not just about, oh, I was a priestess in a past life in, the year 1205 in England. That's really great. That's cute. That's fun. But how does that help where you're going? We can't use it as escapism. It's about going back in the files, if you like, and seeing what we experienced and how that has impacted the growth of our soul, not like going back and being like, oh, let's find out what life I lived just for interest. It's always about, for me anyway, it's always about that growth. It's got to be very like pragmatic and practical.
Yeah, I completely agree. For me, it was interesting. Like when I was going to shaman school and I had done this shamanic journey, if you will. And I had, when I was like 3-4 years old, used to push all my hair forward and tell my mom I was Medusa shooting laser beams at her. And
wow.
Here I am, 28 years old, doing this shamanic journey. And I'm like about to leave shaman school because I was not enjoying the experience. And I'm like, let me just pull a random tarot card. For some reason, I pulled this card and it was Greco-Roman. And I was like, what does this even mean? And I go to my friend. She's like, that's a past life card. I was like, why would I pull a past life card if I'm thinking about leaving? I was like, I guess I'll just stay and see what this means. We do the shamanic journey. I end up going back, figuring out I was Medusa and that my mom was Athena who had put the curse on Medusa. I was like, that makes so much sense.
I just got goosebumps all up my arms and legs as you said that.
Yeah. So working through, so when I told my mom this, she looked at it as like the entertainment thing and she's like, oh, Medusa was beautiful, or Queen Athena was beautiful. Da, da, da. I was like, no, you don't understand. Like, this is why we have so many wounds in our relationship.
You put a hex on me 5,000 years ago. This is why we've got drama now.
This is why I always feel like you're attacking me and trying to come after me. Like, I'm like, this is so, and so like, I mean, it is really like, I truly believe that we store those ancestral wounds and like those karmic patterns in our system. So like, I'm so excited for you to get into that type of work because it's just, there's so many layers of it.
That's right. And I'm glad you mentioned the layers. And it is a process of peeling back the layers. And what I find quite often is that people, particularly they've heard of the twin flame terminology, they've done a lot of the spiritual work, but they haven't done a lot of the practical psychological work. And we've got to be careful that we don't get too up, because divine feminine energies, we're very in our upper chakras, heart and throat, eye and crown. We're very much like, I feel, I speak, I see, I know. And that's great, but we've got to ground it into those lower 3 chakras as well. And the grounding part is the practical part. So let's look at this lifetime as well. You know, we've got to be careful when we're doing all the spiritual work and the past life stuff that we're also going to, like counseling, for example, and therapy, and, you know, doing the practical stuff as well. So I always recommend that people do the balance of both. And the thing I have people say consistently about my work is they love how I ground it in. Because as you can imagine, you can talk about twin flames and past lives and really go off into the ethers, but we've got to ground it back in, just as you did there with your mom, and say, okay, but this is not about entertainment or theory. Like, this is the reason behind the struggle that we're having, and here's how we move forward. So I love that you did that.
Yeah. I mean, I love that you said that too, because I get very burnt out sometimes. Like I had, you know, if you've been a podcast listener, know that like the last couple months, I'd say the guests haven't had as much of a spiritual focus. And it's because like I got just so heady on it all. And I was like, I need to take some time, because like you can go down all these rabbit holes and you can learn all of this stuff. And then it's kind of like, okay, I have to exist in this world. I have to be present in this moment. I have to like ground into all of this. And sometimes like, I mean, it's infinite possibilities. Like when you actually think about it, I told you guys I was really good at making heads explode, but like I do that to myself, where I'm like, if we start going back into all of these different lifetimes and all these different things and understanding all these different wounds, like that can feel like I need a tethering life preserver stat at times, which is how I felt before. And I'm sure some of you guys listening have felt before too. So like, I think it's totally okay to like weave in and out of it, but also like having those grounding supports, like you were mentioning, is so, so, so essential.
Yeah, thank you. I'm really glad you said that. And the grounding is important because at the end of the day, it's quite easy to find out what we came here to do. People talk about purpose like it's this big thing, but actually our purpose is healing our soul, and it's our soul's evolution. That's what our purpose is. And we know what that particular area is because it's the thing that hurts the most. It's the thing that's the most difficult for us. And what you were saying when we were chatting earlier was that you instantly knew that relationships are about what can I learn from this? Because you've done that karma in your past lifetime, a very recent one, I expect. Whereas for me, I signed up this lifetime because I know of my 2 recent past lives in World War II and then the Victorian era was not good for me. And it was all about, interestingly, this same person who's the twin flame, who in the first lifetime, of the 2, the earlier one, I died in the first one. Then in the second one, he passed away. And then I did. There's a lot of karma that we had to clear. And there was a point when my soul sort of said, I'm done with relationships. I don't want any more relationship stuff. And now I've signed up to say relationships is my work and I'm not getting out of this. There's no way that I can get out of this work. And that's why it's so, it's been the work of my life. And because it's been the work of my life, that's why I teach on it now, because I've gone so, so deep with it. It was interesting. I was talking to someone recently who knew me in my 20s. I was a very different human in my 20s. I'm sure I'll be a very different, I'm 33 now. I'm sure I'll be a very different human in my 40s as well. But I was talking to them. They're like, oh, you teach on relationship stuff. That's really interesting. Because when I knew you, you were drunk and crying over some guy. And I'm like, that's why I'm teaching on it, because this is my work, right? And incidentally, I actually don't class myself as being a relationships expert or a love coach. There are other people for that, and they're brilliant and beautiful. For me, it's about the healing of the self and the healing of the soul. It's like relationships are our biggest triggers. And if they are our biggest triggers, then what is it meant to teach us? What's it there to teach us? That's why I'm doing this work. But it's been the work of my life. It's been the most difficult thing. And I can't get out of it. So here I am.
I love that. I mean, I always, it's always about running towards those things that cause us the most pain. Have you found that when you've like reclaimed it and said like, okay, I'm integrating this back into my soul, it's not as painful anymore and it actually becomes like really exciting. It's so wild.
Yeah, it's wild. I mean, I feel like I could talk to you for forever about this. There's so much and there's so many layers.
For, you've mentioned healing, you've mentioned clearing out. Earlier, you kind of mentioned doing a cord cutting ceremony and things like that. So I want to talk a little bit about how listeners could go about starting to understand how to heal, how to clear karmic wounds. Obviously, working with you is one of the ways. And just walk us through maybe like 1 or 2 things.
Yeah, so it's what I like to start with is what's the pain and what's the pattern? So what is hurting? Well, it really hurts because this guy isn't choosing me. Okay. So he's not choosing you. How? What's the pattern? Well, he's dating someone else, or he's married. And I'm like, okay, no judgment. But at the same time, you're choosing someone who literally is not available to you. So let's dig in deeper. Has that happened before? Yeah, if I'm honest, the last few people I've dated have either been dating someone else or they've just not really wanted to be in a relationship with me. Great. So why are you doing that? Where's that coming from? And this is usually when people sort of stall a bit, and that's when the digging happens. And usually with that particular pattern, it is about, again, what we saw in childhood. So if we are choosing someone who isn't choosing us, if we are staying in this fantasy relationship, it's about, why am I doing that? We don't do things for no reason. So, okay, what would be a reason I would be in a fantasy relationship? What I mean by fantasy relationship is I'm imagining that I'm dating this guy. And this sounds like a bit out there, but like so many people do this. They're like, oh, there's this person and, I haven't seen him in a while. Like I haven't really seen each other in a month. But when we see each other, we have an amazing time. You've got friends like this probably. And, so many people do this. But it's about asking, okay, so what's the pattern here and what's the pain behind it? So what do you gain from doing this? And people are like, well, I'm not gaining anything. It's causing me a lot of stress and pain. But okay, but what are the possible net benefits? Well, the benefits of a fantasy relationship are you're not actually dating this person, so they can't reject you. You can't be intimate with them. You can't lose yourself in a relationship, and you can't be abandoned. So there's probably a fear of engulfment, so a fear of losing yourself in the relationship, a fear of intimacy, and a fear of abandonment. And so you stay in this fantasy relationship because you can't get hurt, you can't get close, and they can't leave because they're not even with you. So knowing that, where's that model come from? What was your relationship like with your father? What was your relationship like with your mother? And then once that's sorted, then we can go through some past lives and see what occurred there as well. But that's where I start. It's what's the pattern and what's the pain behind it and what's the net benefit, because that's what you're trying to avoid. Does that make sense?
That makes perfect sense. And I mean, at that point too, for like real world application, because I feel like this is where things kind of get caught up sometimes for some maybe more type A people. Like, how would you describe healing to somebody? Like, is it just like that light bulb moment of like what I just experienced? Like, oh wow, okay, I finally put those pieces together. I can like reclaim that now and go ahead and notice when that's coming up and choose to react differently? Or is it more of just like when you're actually going through the choice of reacting differently, whether you realize what you're doing or not? Like, at what point would you say like somebody's actually on a healing path versus just kind of either
swimming in the soup of it?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, got it. So the modalities that I use, well, okay, here's the thing. I'll back up for a second. Usually the people that come to me are not very particularly green when it comes to this work. You know, they've been studying this for a long time. They have their own tools, whether it's meditation, journaling, whatever it might be. What I do is I actually create, for all of my private clients, I create a custom meditation. So I create meditations as well, and it's for them. It's with their particular wound in mind. With if there's a particular karmic partner or a twin flame at play, I'll plug into that because I can tune into spirit in that way, and I'll create something for them that's 20 to 30 minutes that they can listen to, and it's for them and it's for their soul, and that is really helpful. That's and really awesome. Healing. They might want to journal on it. When I am able to do past life regression, I'll do that. But I might refer them on to friends of mine who do past life regression and energy clearing in a very practical way, though. It's also about doing the talk therapy side and saying, okay, well, what is it that you actually want? What is it you want, and where are you, and where's the gap, and how do we close the gap between where you are and where you want to be? And that comes from my background as a coach. I know coaching is unregulated, but I studied coaching and qualified in coaching. So I put on my coaching hat at that point and look at where they are now, where they want to be, and how to ultimately get there. So it's kind of a blend of the traditional and the spiritual in terms of the actual tools I use. And then it's about, you know, meeting again in a session and saying, this is what we talked about last time. These are the things we were going to implement. Have you implemented them? Have you set the boundaries with the person? Have you had the conversation with the person? Have you done this? Have you done that? And if yes, how did it go? If no, let's dig into how I can support you with that. So I like to see the practical. I don't like to just talk about it, although it's great to talk about it in this way. When I'm actually working with someone one-on-one, it gets really practical. Like, what are you actually going to do? Mm-hmm. What are you going to do in the real world practically? Because that's how you change your life, and that's how you shift, and that's how you create a different reality, is doing shit. Sorry, I'm not sure if I'm allowed to swear on your podcast.
Totally can.
Yeah. I would have been dropping a lot more F-bombs if I'd have known. But yeah, it's like, how are you going to get shit done practically? We can meditate our asses off, but you know, what are you actually going to do? What does that look like practically? And that's going to be different for different people.
I love that, because I think too often, like, that's where I have found myself struggling the most with all of this type of work. It's like, okay, I get I'm supposed to meditate. I get I'm supposed to journal. I get I'm supposed to do all these things. And it's like, if I wasn't me, where I just like have this fire inside to go out and like apply knowledge, man, I could totally get caught up in just like sitting there and thinking all of these different things. And I see such a difference like between me and my husband, where like he goes through a lot of the same practices that I go through. Like whenever I'm doing something, he's like, oh, I want to do that too. Oh, you signed me up also. But then like it'll take him 5 months to go and have a conversation with that person for that karmic relationship. And I'm like, yeah, I would have done that like the next day. And so I think sometimes I love that you're kind of holding people accountable to follow through with it all, because otherwise I think we get caught up just like sitting on our high horses saying like, okay, look at everything I know.
Yeah. Yeah. I actually call that spiritualizing dysfunction. And what that is when people take these ancient sacred terms and these practices and use it to justify staying stuck. So looking at the twin flame thing, for example, like, oh yeah, he's treating me like shit, but he's my twin flame. And I'm like, no, we come from this long line of medicine women and these priestesses and all these powerful women. And they would be turning in their graves if they knew that we were using this beautiful sacred work to justify propping up the patriarchy, justify staying small, justify waiting for a guy to call. And no, that's not what we're here to do. We're here to be powerful. We're here to rise up and be really loving, but love ourselves first. And that's not selfish. It's about taking care of us and then loving from a healthy place, and not using the term twin flame to stay attached, to stay addicted, to stay codependent, to stay stuck, etc., etc. So we've got to be really careful that we don't spiritualize dysfunction with some of this sacred work and just spread it over our wounds. And I also call it polishing a turd. So that's kind of, it's like, you'll excuse the phrase. It is. It's like taking the turd representing your traumas, your shit, right? And glossing it over with some spirituality. It's like, you have a shiny turd now, but it's still a turd, right? Yeah. You got to clean up the turd. You got to do the heavy lifting. There's no other way. So wild. Everyone's now envisioning a turd. Isn't it amazing what we can do with words?
It really is. I mean, I love it. It's really the perfect visual for that. So kind of on that note too, though, would you say that anyone is ever supposed to or end up with their twin flame?
It does happen. Yeah, it does happen. But I'm really cautious about saying that, because I think a lot of people that use the term twin flame, it's probably not twin flame. It's probably a karmic type of person. It is really, really rare. If anyone's interested, I've got a quiz on my website, Have You Met Your Twin Flame, which is very, very popular, as I'm sure you can imagine. And that is really, it's meant to be a guide. It's not meant to be gospel, because it's something that ultimately we need to use our own discernment on and put it through our own filter and decide, who is this person to me? I've had very, smart, spiritually switched on, intelligent women come to me and say, I've got two partners who both seem exactly like twin flames. So what's going on here? So at that point, you've almost got to remove the label and say, let's look at the pattern and not the label, because the label doesn't matter as much at that point. But yeah, some people do end up with their twin flame, but it's not the goal. The goal is healing always. And, it's funny, I have people, comment on my content sometimes and they go, oh, I have really surrendered and I have really detached. But I also wonder, like, when's he going to call? And I'm like, oh, no,
so you haven't.
You have not. And I got this image the other day of someone sat in meditation saying, I surrender the outcome. I'm not attached to the label. I'm not attached to the person. I'm not attached to the outcome. And then like opening like one eye and looking at their phone and going, has he texted me yet? It's that kind of thing, right? Of I surrender. When's he going to call? That's not surrender is. It's not. That's not what it is.
No. Oh my gosh. I love that. What's it called? I mean, it's true. It's like we have these deep grooves. I don't know if anyone's familiar. I've talked about on the podcast before, like with the violet flame, and like it really like it teaches you, like we have these deep energetic grooves, which is why I love that you give your private clients these meditations, because that's how you're going to actually create new pathways in your energy field to heal and to let these new experiences. It's not just sitting down and meditating once and then in the back of your head checking your phone.
Yes, exactly.
That's the old energy pathway.
Yeah, exactly. It's so funny. Our mind is very smart and we can justify staying in the same pattern. That's why it's helpful to have a coach or a mentor or a counselor or whoever it might be, or a trusted friend to really bounce ideas off and make sure that we're not just getting in the same pattern and thinking that we're doing something different.
Totally. So I don't even know where I'm going to go with this question, but this happened to me this weekend and I feel like for some reason I'm feeling called to bring it up right now. So I am doing Hypno Birthing classes for the delivery of my baby in January. And essentially it teaches you how to kind of breathe the baby down. And you go through different meditations and use all these different things, and like really talks about how like this idea of pain is a learned modeled behavior from both what we're seeing in media, but also what happened to the medical system over the last several generations, where it became a fear response that we were taught to have. Like when you watch animals, they, their labor pauses if there's something happening, and the mother will move and she'll go bring her baby kitten somewhere safer if there's something like a bird creeping around or something like that, and she'll have a totally healthy birth. And back in the day, women would give birth in the woods. They'd leave the town, they'd give birth, they'd come back with their baby. And it wasn't until like all this medieval stuff started happening. So we were doing this meditation in the Hypno Birthing class. And I honestly have no idea what the meditation was supposed to be, but in true form, I ended up going off into past lives where she's like imagining, where like I see myself giving birth. And then in one of them, like just leaving the baby, it was like in that kind of medieval time where like you weren't supposed to be having kids. And then there was like one where I gave birth and like everything was okay. And then there was one that was like a much more recent past life where like I was a businesswoman and like left the kid again. So I like had already kind of known, like that stuff didn't necessarily surprise me because I had already, if you had listened to the episodes with Danielle, you know, it was a concept that had been brought up to me before where like I had been a businesswoman in past lives where like I'm here for family and kids. So I was like, okay, well that doesn't like scare me because that kind of makes sense. That's like the karma I'm here to like write in this life. But it was like really like I don't even know how to process or digest the information of like these like wooden cabin ones that I was experiencing. And I'm like, what is all of this supposed to mean? So I don't know why, but I felt like I just needed to share that with you and see if you had anything.
No, I appreciate that. And I want to be very sensitive because, you know, I haven't birthed children in this lifetime. So I don't want to get on my high horse and give you a load of spiritual mumbo jumbo, which may or may not serve you. But I think what really stood out to me the most in that is that women like you are birthing this new generation of souls and children who are entering a very different kind of world than we were, who are changing the paradigm, who have done the healing work themselves and who are so much more conscious than the past generation, our parents' generation, our grandparents, our great-grandparents. This is kind of I hate to sound so woo-woo, but it's the new earth. It is the new earth because this new generation are going to be raised by parents like yourself and your partner who are, I think it's called conscious parenting. Is that the phrase?
Yeah, that's like the phrase that's going around now.
Is that the thing, isn't it? Yeah, hashtag, for goodness sake.
I'm pretty sure
like, it will be. Like, I don't know about these things, but what it is that those children will not have to do anywhere near as much therapy as we needed to do. And that's really what it's about. This is how things change in a very practical way because we've done the work and now we're birthing these children and we're raising them in a very different way.
Yeah, that makes sense. Because every night I'm always like calling on my spirit guides and the baby spirit guides. And I'm like, remove any ancestral wounds and traumas from our lineage. Like,
so beautiful. And it's so beautiful that you have the knowledge to do that. And the fact that you even have that intention is huge. I'm sure our parents and our grandparents didn't even have that terminology. Yeah. Right?
It's so wild to me. Yeah. The whole concepts of ancestors has been something like I've been feeling. It's funny. It started, I didn't even know I was pregnant at this time, but Shaman Dirk was staying with me for a couple of weeks and like he did some big workshop locally and he's like, you just had all the ancestors like diving into your body. And I didn't know I was pregnant at the time. I found out like a week later. And so ever since then, I was like, there's something going on with me and the ancestors and I don't know what it is. And then I read the book Spirit Babies and the last part of the book is called The Birth Shaman. And
you had the birth shaman,
and the birth, the whole the concept of the birth shaman is that like it inhabits your body when you're actually going through birth. So it's not like it's not Rachel delivering the baby; it's like the ancestors of the birth shaman that's actually going through and like delivering the baby. And I'm like, okay, so cool. So it's not like me having to do all the heavy lifting. I have all these ancestors with me, but like I'm so intrigued because like I had talked to an astrologist way earlier this year, and she was like, you need to be doing like ancestral offerings. I was like, okay, there's something karmic in all of this. There's something happening in all this. I still don't totally understand what it is. So I'm like, anyone I talk to, I'm like, do you know anything about this?
Yeah. It'll all unravel with time. I mean, I'm only a couple of years older than you, but I'm on the other side of the old Saturn, which I know you're talking to Danielle about. And for me, it was intense. It sounds like you've done a lot of work in your past lives and you did a lot of stuff there. So you're probably going to be absolutely fine. But for me, you know, I learned a lot during that time. And even though we're only 4 years apart, I think being on the different side of that Saturn kind of mountain is interesting.
What was your Saturn return about? And like how did all of that kind of shift for you once you got out of it?
Oh, it was a total shit show. If I'm being honest.
I love it.
It was an actual shit show. No, so I think mine started at 29 because I was working in corporate PR. I was in publicity. I was working for the biggest public relations company in Canada, and I was living in Vancouver. I now live back in England. And I quit my job in PR to become a life coach, as you do, just, casual. Went into my boss's office. I'm like, hi, I'm going to become a life coach. She's like, okay, are you feeling all right? Should we call someone to help you psychologically, So I trained as a life coach and basically set that whole thing up and then fell back onto publicity as I was setting that business up, et cetera, et cetera. And then I would say one of the biggest shifts was in 2016, then moving from Canada back to England. I've been living in Canada for 7.5, nearly 8 years, and then moving back to England and then setting up my life back in England. I also had let me try and get this right now. It was a Sagittarius progressed moon, which is all about movement too. So that was another thing on top of the Saturn return. So for me, it's been about a lot of movement, setting up businesses, tearing down a life in another country, moving back to England, setting things up here, meeting the twin flame, going into a different line of work. It's been a lot.
I was going to say, where's the twin flame come into that? Because I know that he popped his head up again.
He's like, hi, I'm just going to just say hi now. I'm like, really, now? Now you show up. Yeah. Okay, I know we agreed to this, but this is bullshit. So yeah, he showed up in late spring, early summer of 2017 of last year. And it's life has literally not been the same. You cannot unknow what you know, you cannot unsee what you've seen, and it's been a trip. It's been trippy. Like I said, not everyone experiences a twin flame, but that doesn't mean twin flames are better or worse. It just means they're here to serve a purpose. And if you've got a lot of karma to clear, they're actually an accelerator. They're a catalyst, and that in and of itself is very efficient. But because it happens in a short period of time, it's intense, and we're laughing now because it is kind of funny, but at the time it was no joke. It was full-on.com.
Oh my gosh. I mean, well, it's interesting. I like that, but I like that you say it's very efficient because it's like, okay, I don't have to go through 3 lifetimes for this. I can just go through this. And if I get it really quickly and understand it, the person may only be in there for a year. It's more so if I'm holding on with the death grip to what I think things should be, where it could really drag out for my entire lifetime right now.
Yeah, and I think with me, if I'm being honest, I could have got the message a bit quicker, but it was only 18 months to learn.
That's quick.
It was pretty quick, but I'm very efficient. I've got Virgo at I don't know how many degrees, the maximum you can have. My moon is 28 degrees Virgo, something like that. It's the top, total anal retentive one. I'm at the top of the scale. So I thought 18 months was a little too long. But in the grand scheme of things, it was, it had to happen. It was quick. It was like ripping off a Band-Aid, and it hurt like hell, but it had to happen. And I'm at least hopefully I don't have to incarnate with this person again. Hopefully we're done, but I guess we'll see.
It's funny. I always say that. I'm like, I say that for a lot of people. I'm like,
are we done now?
Are we done now? Just can you give me the sign that this is cleared? Because I feel like it's cleared, but I really want to make sure if it's not cleared, that we take care of it this lifetime because I'm not doing this again.
Yeah. And I think we get to that point when we're very old souls and we know we've had a few go arounds at this. Let's not do this again. I'm done.
Yeah. Definitely sounds like me. So so you're in England now. So how do you work with your clients? I know you do life coaching. I know you do twin flame and karmic work. How do your services all break down? And where can people find you?
For sure. So people can find me on my website, which is cherylmuir.com. I'm also on most of the social media machines. So Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. My handles there are at Cheryl J. Muir. And there's 2 main options to work with me. I have a membership community called the Infinite Love Community. And that's a really low cost offer where people come in and join a group. And we have monthly coaching calls. They can ask questions anytime. I do a prize draw every month for people to win a one-on-one session with me if they're in the community, which is amazing. And it's really a way for people to get that longer term support, but do it in a really affordable way. And then people can also work with me privately one-on-one for a month or a couple months at a time. And that's when we really go deep and people get the custom meditations, and we do the sessions every week, and we do it via Skype or Zoom or one of the modalities, so people can really be anywhere in the world and I can help them. So that's really how I work, and that's where people can find me. And I post on the socials all the time, and there's lots and lots of information to dig into. Oh, I've also got lots of meditations on my YouTube channel as well. So if people like the sound of the meditations, then dig back into my YouTube, just put my name into YouTube, and you'll see lots of meditations there about clearing karma, ending karmic cycles, and all of that really good, juicy stuff.
Oh, I love that. I love the work that you're doing too, because it really,
Thank you.
I mean, for me, like, there's just so much practicality to this. Like, sometimes with astrology and things like that, it's like, okay, well, what do I do with all this information? Like, how does it actually show up in your life? And when it's showing up in your life, how do you know if you actually, like we were just talking about, are clearing the lesson and getting through it efficiently? And so I love, 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 love what you're doing and offering, and that, like, you really went full tilt on your purpose here, because this is where the rubber hits the road. This is like where we actually
shit hits the fan.
This is where we make sure we don't have to go through these lives with these people again.
It was so funny. And I keep mentioning Danielle because I was listening to that episode literally before we started chatting. That's why it's in the back of my brain. But it was so funny when she said, I didn't have any choice to become an astrologer because I literally had to do this. And that's kind of the same for me. And people say to me, oh, how did you get into this work? I'm like, I was strong-armed by the universe. They like kicked me into this. Like, you better do this shit this time, because there's no do-over here. You've got to do it this lifetime. So, when you're doing the work that heals your soul, and you know it's your work, there's no getting out of it.
But kudos to you too, because like I felt like I was strong-armed into this chapter of my life, and then this chapter that's coming next and stuff like that. But I have just seen recently, one thing that always makes my blood boil is like when people will comment on like my blog posts or my Instagram. I love that you guys comment, so please hear this fully. But one thing that makes my blood boil is when they're like, oh, I couldn't do that. Oh, I can't do that. It's like, but you can. Like, you just have to allow it to happen, because chances are, like, the universe will start off throwing little gentle nudges, and then it will throw stones, and then it will throw boulders. And
then they bring in the truck after that, and you don't want the universe to bring in the truck. I've had the truck treatment. It's not good.
Yeah. I mean, like, truly, I always hear so many people say, like, oh, how do you, like, I wish I was that happy. I wish I was that positive. I wish I, would do these different things. But, like, I think you're a walking embodiment. Like, it's just, you have to really give into it all. Even if it's people think you're crazy and your job's like, what are you doing? Do you need to go see somebody? Like, are you sure about this? Because, man, that's where the unknown often lies, like, our greatest gift.
I appreciate that so much, Rachel. I really receive that. So thank you. And I want to say to everyone too, like, it's so easy when we hear someone on a podcast to kind of put them on a pedestal and be like, oh, they're doing their soul's work. But let me tell you, like, this shit has not been easy, and it continues to be a challenge for me. And I'm sure it will do once I've worked through a lot of this karma, because I'm going to be honest, I'm still in it, right? I'm still doing this work that I agreed to do. And even though I am really honest on social media, like, I don't show everything. I don't show all of the struggles and the things that happen that are not so shiny. And so I just really want to encourage everyone, when you see someone you really admire, even when like you and me, they're really honest and they're sharing as much as they can, there's so much that you don't see. So please don't think that life is our Instagram feed, because that's a beautiful part of it, and that's so important. But there's a lot more behind the scenes. I just want to really encourage people, like, not to compare and not to use social media as a means to distance themselves. Because I was going through something recently, and I talked to one of my friends confidentially, and I was like, I'm going through this thing and you're not going to believe it. She said, I'm going through the same exact thing right now. And I was so shocked, because I've been looking at her stuff on Instagram, and this is one of my best friends, and I was stunned that she was going through the same thing as me. So it just goes to show, like, we don't always know what people are going through. So when people say those kind of comments, like, they don't see your behind the scenes. They don't see my behind the scenes. And doing this work is not all, I always call it buttercups and Battenberg. Battenberg is a delicious cake that we have in England. It's not all, flowers and cake. It's not. There's dark nights of the soul, and there's shadowy Scorpio kind of energy and work in there. So it's possible, is what I'm trying to. This sounds. It was meant to be like a rousing speech. It turned into a bit of a downer. But what I was trying to say was, like, I went off.
I mean, you ended it sounding like a Harry Potter character, so it went really well for me.
Yeah, I graduated straight from Hogwarts. It's funny, in my school in England, we had houses, like, they were called like Marshall, Preston, Cavendish. And I was telling someone about this in Canada and they went, oh my God, did you go to Hogwarts? Pretty much went to Hogwarts. No, yeah, what I was meaning to say really is that like it's possible for anyone, and please don't compare yourself to someone that you really admire, because we've all been through it and we continue to do this work. So,
yeah. To that kind of same point, this was a conversation I literally was having last night with my husband. You know, there's that one side where you're stuck and you haven't actually taken action yet. And like, you don't see like the tears, the pain, the everything that like Cheryl experienced, that I've experienced, things like that. But then there's also this other thing I kind of just feel like I need to acknowledge too, which is when you have started off, like you've started making the transitions towards where you know you're supposed to be going, like you have, like I have, but you're not actually, like things haven't fully clicked yet. I was saying this to my husband last night, like where I'm at currently from the outside, like I get a lot of people that are like, oh wow, you've done so well for having the blog for only 2.5 years. Like, you know, the whole pedestal thing that you were talking about. And in my head, I'm like, yeah, I have. And I'm not taking away from that, but there's still this angst inside me and this like disconnect and this like, but what about this? But what about this? But what about this? But what about this? And it's not just like that entrepreneurship voice that like I think a lot of people that might be entrepreneurs are very familiar with. It's because I know that my soul hasn't fully clicked into that place yet. And so I'm like, I was talking about another spiritual kind of thought leader that gained a lot of popularity over the last 1.5 years. I'm like, you know, before this past 1.5 years, she was doing all sorts of other different things in her business. And then like you see that shift happen. It's like, okay, well, when's that shift going to happen? So like, it doesn't matter if you haven't actually taken this step out yet, or if you've taken a couple steps, like that feeling, I think so many of us are going through. And yeah, I want to kind of acknowledge that it's not like one and done. Like when you think you get to that destination, it probably, there's like more is being unfolded.
Yeah, thank you. I really want to just quickly just honor you for saying that, because when you are a leader and you have a really significant platform, and it would be so easy for you not to say what you just said. And the fact that you said that is going to help so many people. And I really admire and respect you for that. So thank you.
Oh, thank you. I'm so happy that. Thank you so much for coming on.
Oh, thank you for having me. This is amazing.
I will include links for where to find Cheryl all in the show notes for you guys too, in case you're driving and didn't have a chance to write those down. I'm just so thank you so much. This is amazing. My heart needed this today.
Oh, my pleasure. Thank you so much.
All right, you guys, I hope you enjoyed that episode as much as I did. I know, like I said, that's probably one of my favorite episodes I've done in a while. So if you enjoyed it as much as I did, I'd love it if you could screenshot it, go ahead and post it on Insta stories, tag me at The Confused Millennial, tag Cheryl at Cheryl J. Muir, and I'll include how to spell all of that in the show notes below. That way we can say hi, get to hear, see who's actually out there listening. And also, it just really helps the podcast grow. And it lets me know which guests you guys are really into and which ones maybe topics I should steer more clear of. So with that, also, if you haven't already, like I mentioned at the start of the podcast, we're doing every other week episodes. So make sure to hit the subscribe button so that way you never miss an episode, because I know it can be hard to remember to come back and listen if you aren't in like the weekly habit of it all. So with that, I will talk to you guys in a couple weeks, and I hope your January 2019 is kicking off to an awesome start.